Hey, welcome to Overtime, where we take Sunday's message further. My name is Jeremy, and I'm your host. And this is a podcast where we just want to ask the questions that we think that you would ask as it relates to Sunday's message. And as we do so, we hope that it helps you grow in your life and your faith. With that being said, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of the podcasts that are coming out. Not only that, hit the like button, because when you do so, it helps us help other people. And if you ever have a question about Sunday's content or about Overtime, you can submit those to overtime@npaustin.com, and we will be sure to get to those in future podcasts. So with that being said, here's a quick recap of Sunday, and then we're going to jump into our conversation today.
Well, today we are in part 2 of this series that we've entitled Level Up, where we're talking about how do we take our faith to the next level. I want you to think about in your life, something I think all of us have said, I've said, you've said, I wouldn't be where I am today without them. Like, it's almost like this divine appointments in your life of people that have given you such insight into your life or perspective into your life or encouragement or hope. Those are called providential relationships. Providential means at just the right time, almost every time, when I hear a faith story, I hear a providential relationship. The author of Hebrews continues, spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. And in summary, the author of Hebrews is saying, hey, staying connected to a community of faith, because that's what grows your faith. I'm telling you, that's what activates your faith to the next level. But it requires a community of faith.
All right, so Buck, you are headed out of town this week?
Yep, Thursday.
And you're going to experience something pretty exciting for people who like that kind of thing.
Yes,
And
I'm
then-
going to the Mecca.
The Mecca. And the people who don't like that kind of thing are kind of like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
Have
The
fun.
Mecca of NASCAR is Daytona. Daytona International Speedway. I mean, if you go there, that is like holy ground to racers. So Sam and I are going, and I've never been. I'm so excited. I've only been to one racetrack. That's the Texas Motor Speedway. And I thought NASCAR was so goofy. And when I went, I was like, this is the most amazing thing ever. and I love the people because it's so diverse. I love the energy because there's barbecue and turkey legs and flags all around.
Nice.
And there's we're going to see how it's going to go. So I'm so excited. And I get to hang out with my son, Sam.
That's cool. Mm-hmm. You know who you need to talk to about NASCAR is Chris Roden, who sings on Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
He is a big NASCAR guy.
Really?
Yeah, and he's told me the same exact thing you said, that before you go, you're like, this is the weirdest thing ever.
Yeah.
And then you go and you're like, I get it.
Yeah. Well, I was dating Jill at the time. So this is, that's 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
And her family was into NASCAR. And I'm like, oh, I got to get in good with Jill.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was like, fine, I'll go to the NASCAR, left.
Yeah.
It was like the whole, and I went, I was so wrong. It was so cool. And
Yeah.
it was so loud. And they're so powerful. And there's a lot of so's in there.
Yeah. Well, I bet Sam's going to love it too.
Yeah. I think, he's big into cars. So
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I mean, I've got multiple reasons why I'm excited to go, but one of those is Daytona.
Before we came to this podcast, we were just shooting a story video, and Sam is learning about some of these things, and so he came and helped us out.
Yeah.
And when we were sitting in the driveway about to leave the person's house, he had his Mustang, and I had my CX-7, and I revved the engine of the CX right next to him. I revved the engine of the CX-7, and it was like, wah, wah. And then he turned on the Mustang, and I was like, yeah, you win.
Yes, being 18 and
Yeah.
having he built that engine and he's like, raw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I told him, I opened up the trunk and I was like, you like that storage space, Sam? Bet you don't have that, do you?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if you ever want to trade, you just let me know, my friend.
Giddy up.
And he laughed at it, so it's good.
Yeah. That's my boy.
Yep. Well, anyways, so we had Level Up Part 2 this past week. And we talked about how, the next thing, the second thing that helps us take our faith to the next level.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing was providential relationships, that there are these relationships that come into our life at some point. And really, God brings these people into our life. I mean, that's that key word, providential, right there.
Yeah.
And we bump into these people. And then we have those sentences that we say later on where we say, I'm so glad they came into my life in that season. or I'm so glad I had that person to lean on, or I'm so glad that person told me this when I wasn't willing to listen to anybody else, and they said that, and it was hard to hear, but I'm so glad they said it.
Yeah.
And we have those kind of relationships, and those are relationships that grow us in our faith. And you talked about something pretty specific at the end. You just said that more times than not, people who are walking away from faith typically have walked away from a community of faith first.
Yeah.
Like that tends to be the first step before people walk away from faith.
Right.
I wanted to just add on to there. I think people tend to stop growing in their faith when they walk away from a community of faith.
Yeah.
You know, like you tend to not grow very much in isolation in terms of taking our faith to the next level. And so providential relationships are really, really important. And so we want to unpack those a little bit more here.
Yeah. And a lot of times, you walk away from the community of faith, and it's not necessarily for a bad reason. I mean, maybe, you start a new job, or, you have kids, or, you've been in a long stretch of like being engaged and very intentional, maybe in the church or whatever. And, or, a tragedy or traumatic thing happens, and you just there's good reasons. But what happens is what I've seen time and time again, is that, just over time, either, it's like, man, I need to get some comfort. I need to get some replenishment. I need to get some rest. Okay. Well, over time, before long, it's like, well, faith begins to diminish, or, I used to do that. And so I've just seen that time and time again. And I just think, it's important to realize there are good reasons, but it's also important to manage that tension well, because the longer you stay away from being intentionally engaged in those faith community relationships, your faith gets fatigued, and eventually, you can walk away pretty easy.
Yeah. And that's really where that complacency grows. Like complacency towards church, faith, Jesus, God is just when you kind of step out of those communities, and that complacency grows to just walking away eventually.
And everybody, I mean, it's so practical. Like if you're on a football team and you're like, the camaraderie with the guys, and, the synergy and lifting weights, and, the emotional defeat, and, the emotions of a win, and all those kind of things create that kind of limit, that liminal space, or, it's, and when you're not part of that, you feel it. And there's a loss of like momentum. There's a loss of intentionality. There's there's a loss of, just working out and all that kind of stuff. So I think, in business, you feel that, in sports, you feel that, in groups, you feel that, if, whatever thing, if you're part of a mountain biking club and you do it all the time, I mean, there's just momentum with that.
Yeah.
And same thing I think is true with faith.
Yeah. The ironic thing is you and I sitting here are both like mega introverts. Right?
Yes.
I mean, I sat down in your office yesterday, and I don't know if you remember. Yeah. But where you said, how you doing? And I was like, oh, man, I had a great weekend on Saturday. Ashley had this thing all day, and we had and I was by myself all day.
Yes.
It was awesome.
Yes.
And it was awesome. Like, I meant it. But I also know, even though I'm an introvert, there's something in me that, like, so desires community. Why do you think God designed us to be engaged in community and meaningful relationships? Like, why, kind of theologically, like, as humans, like, why are we designed this way?
Yeah. Well, I think, from more of a theological perspective, I think it's meaning. I think like that's what you're designed to do. Like if you're going to give somebody meaning, one of the things in terms of meaning is love. You discover meaning in love. But if you have no one to love, how are you going to define and experience, love? And if you can't experience love, if you can't experience that sense of belonging, if you can't experience that sense of joy, because there's no one on the other side of you. Imagine if you're totally on an island, like, cast away. It's the whole idea to go like, where is the community that actually provides meaning? It's not there. And I think one of the reasons why God created you and I for community and relationship is to not only experience his greatest gift he's given us, which is love, but also to experience meaning. And I don't think you can outside of community. So
yeah,
I think that's one of the reasons why.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, it's interesting to see theological concepts that have been written down for 3,500 years. I mean, you go back to Genesis, and God says it's not good for man to be alone, right? And that was in a different context, marriage, relationship, all that stuff. But it's not good for man to be alone. This is something he said 3,500 years ago in the book of Genesis. But then you take it to like today, and these researchers and psychologists who are researching like this tribe mentality and the loss of a tribe mentality in culture today, and the missing components that we then have. I think there's actually a book called Tribes by Seth Godin or something like that. I listened to it a while back, but and he just talks about that. Like, we were designed to be in a tribe, like in a group of people. Like, that's where we do life function. That's where we experience, like you said, meaning and love and purpose and all those really important things.
Yeah, it's I was talking about parenting a few weeks ago, and I talked about, it's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's the pinnacle of meaning. It's the pinnacle of joy. It's the pinnacle of happiness I've had at this exact same time. And I just think that doesn't happen outside a relationship, and I think God designed you for that. I also think, one of the reasons why, God said it's not good to be alone is life is just tough. I think there are really cool moments of life, but there's really, difficult things of life. And so when you go through difficulty, if it's a traumatic event, if it's a hardship, a relational thing, whatever it is, there's real emotion associated with that. There's hurt, there's pain, there's questions, there's, why. And in the midst of that emotional fog, and I alluded to this on Sunday, we can make some decisions that just perpetuate the brokenness that we're experiencing, or just take things even, to a greater degree of hurt. And in the emotional fog, we can't see clear. It's hard to know what to do. It's hard to discern. It's not good to be alone. And so, somebody outside of that says, man, I have perspective, I have insight, I have hope when you don't have hope. And that's what I alluded to on Sunday that I personally experienced is critical for that, these emotional fog, these life hurt moments. I think that's a really important reason why God would create community for you and I, so that we can persevere. It's like what Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, 2 are better than 1. And then you add one more, 3, that's even better. Because when somebody falls, you can help them get back up. You can help them see things that in the pain of the life and hurts of life and the emotions of life, even if it's like, just, hey, I didn't make the team, or, she said no, or he said no. Those are painful things. And in the midst of that, we can make some really drastic decisions because the emotional fog is heavy. And that's where, having community is so critical, for somebody to remind you of what's true, remind you of who you are, remind you that there's hope beyond these circumstances. And then I think the other thing that, I've shared with you and we've talked about before is the whole, I've said that, typically your weakness doesn't get you, it's your blind spots. Mm-hmm. And, being self-deceived, by the very definition of that, is I've deceived me because I'm the only one thinking about what I'm thinking about. It's like I've got this idea in my mind, or this is going to make me happy, or this is going to give me pleasure, or this is going to, finally bring me meaning in life. And or this is the way I want to respond because I'm hurt.
Yeah.
And it makes all the sense of the world to me.
Or even just, this is how I want to view the world.
Yeah, I want to view the world this way, or this is the way God is, or this is the way other religions are, or, all those kind of things. And man, I've seen this so many times. And, there's a proverb I've quoted before that says, there's a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. I don't want that for anyone. And part of the solution, and God knew this when he created us, was to go, it's not good for man to be alone. Because you can talk yourself into some of the craziest ideas. Mm-hmm. So, being willing to sit down with somebody who you've built trust with, camaraderie, relationship, community with, who can look at you and say, you're crazy, mm-hmm. which you've said to me a couple times.
Yeah.
And, or, hey, let me ask you some questions.
Which you've said to me a couple times.
Every now. But, that keeps us from self-deception, which keeps us from perpetuating something that's harmful, or it helps us in the emotional fog. And then ultimately, I think from a theological perspective, it gives us meaning.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I think intuitively, most people, maybe not most people, but I think intuitively a lot of people would agree with all this. Mm-hmm. But there's still something in us that resists and pushes back on relationships, on providential relationships, where God might be wanting to use a relationship with somebody in our life, but we're pushing back and we're resistant. Why do you think we do that? Why do we push back against this thing that's really designed for us and so good for us?
Yeah, I think there's lots of reasons. I think, immediately when you were saying that, pride popped in my mind. I think, I want to do what I want to do, and I really don't care about what you think what I want to do or think about what I want to do. Yeah. And so I think pride pops in our mind. I think, a biblical theme, if you read the Bible from cover to cover, it's, mankind wants to do what they want to do, what they see right in their own eyes. And so if you get in the way of that, if I know I'm going to subject myself to a community where you may have a different opinion, and therefore I have to give a reason for why I think what I think or why I'm going to decide what I'm, sometimes it's just pride, like, hey, I'm not interested. I'm just going to do what I want to do, and I don't care about you, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that pops in my mind. I also think about, especially in today, I think the number one reason I hear that people don't want to get in community is because they're busy. And I totally get it. I say on Sunday a lot, man, I'm with you. Like, I'm one of you. I'm not, I have 5 kids and I have a mortgage and bills and, the pressures and, marriage and life. And I feel all of that. Like, there's so many things contending. And so I think, we're all busy. Yes, that's a real reason to put out there. But I also think, I've heard lots of these kind of statements, if you're going to have something that most people don't have, you're going to have to do something most people won't do. And a lot of times in the midst of the busyness, we have a choice how we're going to allocate time. And you can allocate time binge watching Netflix. You can allocate time, at work. You can allocate time on your hobbies. But I think if you were to pick all the things and say, what's going to give me the perspective, meaning, purpose, my way forward, what's going to help me make better choices and enjoy my relationships at a greater level, what's going to help me see God in a better way, I think you can't get away from the fact that intentional faith community is part of that way forward. And so if you're going to allocate time, time is always a choice, and we're all busy, I think there's no better thing to pick than to be involved intentionally in a faith community. It's a hard choice. We're all busy. But if you're going to experience something perhaps not a lot of people are experiencing, you got to lean in and be bold and take the risk and get involved in community. So I think, pride, busyness, there's a lot of things.
Yeah. It's interesting as you were talking about the busyness piece, I just thought about, there was a couple of weeks span recently where it felt like, Ashley and I were pretty dang busy. Mm-hmm. And we just hadn't hung out with people. We hadn't seen people. And then we finally got to go hang out with some friends. And I had this in the car. I had this oh, man, that felt so good. That was so nice. Just driving away going, dang it. We've been running so hard. We've totally missed on this crucial component of life. This is how we were meant to live, with other people. So
much. And, oftentimes, I said this on Sunday, but one of the coolest benefits is you get to see from a faith perspective, the faithfulness of God. Like when you're in community and you're meet with friends and, and especially an intentional faith community, you get to see somebody who walks in a room and you get to build a relationship with who doesn't believe in Jesus, who has these legitimate questions, who's willing to be intellectually honest and say, let me just put them on the table, and then to watch sometimes, the light come on, for the answers to be present and for them to go, oh my gosh, I just didn't know that. And you get to be present in a life change moment, or, in a marriage that just feels so stuck, or, a parenting relationship that feels so stuck, or a job situation that feels hopeless, or whatever it is. And you're actually praying with individuals, or you're seeing people pray for one another. You're seeing people, love on one another. And then you see God's faithfulness show up in that marriage. You see God's faithfulness show up in that job. You see God's faithfulness show up in that family with their son or daughter. And that happens enough times that you're like, oh my gosh, there is something you just can't put to coincidence that's happening. And there's something that God is doing that's so faithful, therefore he can be faithful for my life. And that's one of the coolest things that you get to see in these, in these faith communities that I've seen time and time again to go I know God is with me. I know he's faithful.
Yeah, 100%. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. There's research that's come out, and we read something together as a leadership team years ago called The Power of Moments. Mm-hmm. And it talks about, life. When you look back on your life, you don't really remember every single piece. You remember the moments you experienced, and they were these memorable experiences that it kind of coined the term. These are moments in life. And it talks about how there were 4 different types of moments. There's a moment of elevation where your senses are elevated, moments of insight where you discover something new in life and it changes your perspective or your direction, moments of pride, like accomplishment, stuff like that. And then the 4th one was moments of connection. Moments of connecting with other people, experiencing community. And it's so fascinating because they said that the more you can rack up moments in your life, the more you can literally, research with support, make it feel like you lived longer. Because you look back on your life and you literally have more moments to point towards. And I think community does that. I think those moments of community where you get to see God's faithfulness, those moments of community where it's just fun. I mean, you're just hanging out with other people.
Yeah.
Those are moments you look, and it just slows everything down in life to where you go, oh yeah, that's what it's all about.
100%. Yeah, I think there's tons of moments. But I think they're much, moments are much, much harder to create by yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not saying you can't have them. I'm just saying it's really cool to see moments happen and, people on the other side of you. And then, for them to celebrate the moments in your life, that happens. So,
yeah.
Yep.
I think, the next question, I'll share something, and then it kind of gets us into the next question. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons people are afraid of community, afraid of relationships, is because they've had a bad experience before. And this can go as surface level as like they were in a church group and it didn't go great, and so they decided to quit and didn't want to do that again.
Yeah.
And then so you go, okay, I don't trust those things, so therefore I'm not going to engage in those things. But it can go all the way to like childhood trauma and experiencing something hurtful. Somebody who was supposed to love you did something hurtful instead. Therefore, it was a break in trust. Therefore, I can't trust people. I can't be vulnerable. And now so many people are walking around with fear of community because of something that's happened in their past. We tend to put up these barriers, these walls, because of things that happen to us from other people. And we go, you know what? I had a bad experience, or I had that hurtful moment. Why do you think it's worth continuing to like push through those to pursue community if we're not experiencing connection with other people, even though we've had those experiences in the past?
Yeah, I think, the reality is, and I just think we just have to have our eyes wide open to this. People are people, and people are messy. And so you're going to have messy moments in community. It's going to happen. I've had many messy moments in community, and I've created the mess in community. I've said things before I actually knew things, and that just created a gap. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. But that also provides opportunity for reconciliation. I've been in faith communities, for me where it was a bad experience because, the nature of my role as a pastor, it's like every question, it was like, hey, Buck, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And I'm like, I'm just one of you, and that creates an awkwardness sometimes in communities. I've been in faith communities where the leader's not prepared, and you can sniff that from a million miles away, and you're like, this is kind of a waste of my time.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So, and I've been in faith communities where people have said something, to somebody who doesn't have faith in Jesus, and they've just, said this blanket statement or this religious statement or something like formulaic, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I know that person, I know their story and what was just said, and it's so uncomfortable. But again, it provides, something that can be healed, something that can be reconciled, something that can be relationally dealt with. So on all that, there are bad experiences. There are, times that you'll invest the time and you're like, was that really worth it? But I think that's also true in life. You can go to a doctor. I've heard this a million, go to a doctor, or you can go to a restaurant, or you can go, on a bad date. But, bad dates don't lead to stop, hey, conclusively, I'm going to stop dating, or I'll never go to a restaurant, or I'll never go to a doctor.
Yeah.
I think they can help us learn some things, help us discover some, things about what makes authentic community, and we just don't give up. And I think I've experienced it time and time again to where if it's just at the top of your priority list to go, you know what, my faith really is going to be stagnant to and ultimately will fatigue if there's not community, intentional kind of faith community. Then if that's not happening, then I've got to go make it happen. And even though I've had a bad experience, well, I think that can be used, and I think we can learn from it. But I think we've still got to be intentional and go, don't give up. Just like you don't give up in other areas of life. This is so for you. It's not to take something from you. It's really for you. And so if somebody's listening or watching and you're like, man, I've tried that faith thing or that faith community thing, and it went south, I get it. I'm with you. And I wish I could take that away. And just say, man, I wish it was awesome. But there are other faith communities out there, and they're fantastic. And, to experience the benefit of that sense of belonging, accountability, care, that sense of like growing in your faith, seeing God in a new way, it's just so cool and it's life-giving, and I want people to experience that.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. I think, too, it's a cool experience when you don't just get to experience other providential relationships that God placed in your life, but you begin to discover that God has placed you as a providential relationship in other people's lives. and in the sense that like God is putting you in their life for a specific reason and a specific purpose. And that's a pretty exciting experience to go through. Like, oh God, you don't just want to teach me, you want me to like help other people. And in tune, like you are learning in that process,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you become more well-rounded. I mean, all these things are fairly intuitive in community, but, if you're around and you're talking about maybe a Bible passage, or you're talking about something in life, or you're talking about even, taboo politics, it's like you have a different political persuasion, or you have a different one. I mean, it's just a cool thing to be in community and just to go, oh, wow, I haven't heard it that way, or I haven't thought about it that way, or man, that's broadened my perspective, broadened my horizon, allowed me to see things in a new way. Community is just so beneficial for us, and it is life-giving. And it's the place I think we find not only meaning in life, it's the place we experience love and a sense of, that purpose in that, but I think it's also the place we experience a lot of growth in faith.
Yeah. I think to anybody listening who is in a group at Northpoint, all of this would just say, hey, like keep at it, like stay in a group, lean into it, like soak up what God might be, teaching you and teaching that community that you're in. But we also wanted to talk about this because we did want to open up the door for people who are not in a group to be able to take a step. And that's 100%. why we talked about it at the end of service on Sunday, is because we know there are so many people who are not in a community group, and providential relationships tend to happen in these community groups time and time and time again. We've seen it, we've experienced it, which is why we do groups like this, because we want to experience providential relationships with one another. We want to be spurred on, as you said, on Sunday. And so I just wanted to briefly, before we wrap up our podcast, talk about these different groups, because I know there's a lot of them. The groups team has been busy.
Yes.
And they're creating a lot of groups right now.
Yeah, there's some awesome ones.
What are the different ones? What's the best way to get connected to one?
Well, so, I mean, there's I think the best way just to get connected and to fill in some of the gaps and get more context is just to go to our website. I think npaustin.com and then /next. Is that the right URL?
I think for this one, go click on connect and go to groups, and then you can hit join a group.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it'll take you to the group shopping page.
Yeah. So if you go there, what Jeremy just said, that's the place to go. There gives you a lot of context. So we've got, I mentioned it on Sunday, but I'll mention it again because it's so great. It's Starting Point. It's happening. It's, I think it's 5 weeks. And this is a place to where I said, if you've got questions about life, or you're just curious why you should be curious about faith, even if it's like a few steps before you have your questions, and or if there's something in the Bible that's always kept you from really going all in for Jesus, or something in history or church history, it's like, man, I just love a place just to have an honest, authentic conversation. That's Starting Point. And so that's an awesome faith community. So many incredible stories, and it just feels like, a place that you're seen, you're heard, you're not shamed, you're not judged. You're just going like, man, I just want to know you more, and I want to understand your questions. And it's a place to honestly just go, let's go explore if Jesus really is who he claimed to be. And so Starting Point is one of our groups. We've got another group called Momentum, and that's a group for single moms. And so I love that because there are a lot of single moms. And there are a lot of questions. You're going, what do I do now? What do I do in terms of career? How do I handle, the finances and the financial pressure of being a mom? How do I bring, to my son something I just fully can't give him? What does that even look like? Are there any other influences that, or how do I deal with this school thing that's happening and I'm pulled every which way? Or, what are the best, daycares out there, or what have you? There's all kinds of, and that community is awesome, and just kind of walking through some really basic principles. There's a husbands group, which I think...
We know the leader.
Oh, yeah, we know the leader.
Yes.
That is yours truly, Josh Montoya. And so he's going to be leading that group, facilitating the whole thing.
Keyword facilitating.
Oh, yeah, baby. And that's, how many weeks is that? Is that 8, 9 weeks?
I think we're going to do 8. Yeah, 8. Because it's
8
like
weeks.
a first initial week. There's 12 chapters of the book. Go through 2 chapters a week.
Yeah.
And then, go have fun to Red Horn or something.
I love
I
it.
think every meeting's going to be at Red Horn, actually.
There you go. Well, he just got everybody to sign up.
There you go. So every husband needs to get in that. We've got men's groups. We've got women's groups. We've got parenting groups. If your kids have a lot of questions about life, about sexuality, about, relationships, about man, as a parent, there's so many things we're facing, social media. I mean, so many things we're facing today to go like, man, I just wish I had some other parents to like talk through these things. What are they learning? Again, that's how you glean wisdom, that we are truly better together.
Yeah.
There's parenting groups, there's money matters and
Marriage matters.
Marriage matters, in terms of marriage. It's like, man, we're stuck. I've said before, if you're stuck either financially or relationally in a marriage, sometimes we just need new information. Well, a community is a great place to go get that new information to help us get unstuck. And so that's, from a marriage perspective, I want you to get unstuck and experience that. From a financial perspective, I want you to get unstuck. So those are some great groups. And then I know you've got some others in terms of just, is there any others on the list that you would just say?
I pulled open the group shopping page because I was like, goodness, we have
know.
so many groups.
There's
This
a
is
bunch
great.
of them. Yeah.
But yeah, we've got some online groups for people who are not quite comfortable getting back in person
Sure.
right now.
Yep.
So there's actually an online group that meets just to talk about Sunday morning. So they meet via Zoom and they just talk about questions about the Sunday's message. So that's pretty cool. Dads groups, you might have already mentioned that, led by one of our good friends, Chris McSorley.
Oh, yeah.
He's leading a dads group.
That's awesome.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's a good dad.
Yeah, he's a great dad. He just became an empty nester.
I know.
So he's got lots of experience.
Yeah, he's in that season now.
Yeah, he is. He seems to be soaking it up too.
Yeah.
Young adults group. So this is for
18 to 22.
18 to 22. Yeah, led by Jeremy and Kendall Geist, who were just out of that season, just got married. And Jason and Sarah Watts, who are much further down the road. They've got some kids and have a lot of marriage underneath their belt. And so let's see what else we got. We got a group that's, it's an adult group that's open to anybody. It's just adults. It's not men or women, but it's really kind of a multicultural group. So it's, regardless of what language you speak or where you come from, this is a group led by an amazing couple here, Sanjay and Aparna. And they just have a heart for bringing people of diverse backgrounds together. And so we've got those like normal couples groups. Oasis is one for people who have been divorced and just are looking for a support group to help them walk through that season.
Yeah, and Oasis is fantastic if you're listening and you're just going, man, I've been through a really difficult season. And what I talked about, that emotional fog, it's present. I know it's present. And so, gosh, we want to do everything we can to help in the midst of that emotional fog, to make great decisions for you, to make great decisions for your future relationships, for your kids, for your family. I mean, there's so many big decisions in the midst of that emotional fog.
Yep. So I think that covers most of them. And I love that we have so many groups because we really want to take away any excuse for somebody to take a step in a community. Want to have a group for everybody. So if you're listening and you're on the fence and you're not sure about getting in a group, then go check out the groups page, the shopping page, because I believe you will find a group that is for you. You'll find a group that you can connect with. And it's really our hope and our prayer that you would experience these providential relationships and you'd experience community.
Absolutely.
So, Buck, anything else you would add?
No, I just say, hey, if you're on the fence, if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, just get in a group. I'll be as pragmatic and straight up. Get in a group. I'm telling you, it's something that I can't make these promises and deliver on them every time, but it's just, it's like I want to say, I promise you won't regret it. It's something that makes life so much better. That's why we say life is better together. It grows your faith. It allows you to see people, see ideas, see opinions, see life in a much more rich way. And I just want that for you. So if you're listening, watching, get in a group.
Right on. Good way to finish. All right, we'll see you guys for part 3 of Level Up this week.
Thank you, man.